The chamber fell silent as the words echoed, sharp enough to slice through the marbled air. "You people should learn your place," he sneered, the microphone catching every ounce of disdain. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Cameras locked in, capturing the tension like a slow-motion explosion. But across the table, she didn't flinch. Jasmine leaned forward, eyes steady, voice calm enough to disarm an army. "Our place," she says softly, "is exactly here." A ripple went through the room, part disbelief, part awakening. The smug grin on his face faltered as the audience realized what had just happened. A moment of grace met arrogance. Indignity didn't blink. The clip would spread within hours, hashtags forming, voices rising, a single exchange igniting a national conversation. But what unfolded next left even her critics speechless. Before that moment went viral, the air in Washington had already been charged with something electric, the kind of tension that hums beneath the surface when people are tired of pretending everything's fine. Committees were fractured along party lines, debates had turned into theater, and truth itself felt like a spectator in its own trial. Jasmine Crockett had been walking into those hearings day after day, carrying not just her notes, but the weight of 1,000 overlooked voices, immigrants, working mothers, young people who still believed that dignity could win over noise. Across from her sat men who mistook volume for authority, mistook swagger for wisdom. They'd built careers on belittling, interrupting, erasing, the performance of power rather than its practice. But Jasmine didn't play by their script. Every word she spoke was measured, deliberate, a reminder that calm was not weakness, but control. The tension that afternoon wasn't just political. It was generational, cultural, moral. Millions watching from their phones felt it too, that silent dare between arrogance and grace. When he mocked her, it wasn't just one woman being dismissed. It was an entire lineage of people told to stay quiet when they deserved the mic. The spark had been struck. Cameras rolled, tweets multiplied. The internet began to hum with something larger than outrage, a hunger for truth wrapped in poise. And as that hunger grew, so did the storm around her name. No one realized that this was only the beginning. He wasn't always the villain of the story, at least not in his own mind. To his supporters, Congressman Mark Ellison was the embodiment of old-school politics, sharp-tongued, camera-ready, fluent in outrage. He'd built his career on the art of domination, sound bites over substance, condescension disguised as conviction. Years ago, his rise seemed unstoppable. He mastered the viral insult, the smirk that told every opponent, "You don't belong here." But behind the polished grin and practiced indignation lay something hollow. His speeches promised respect for the working man, yet his votes betrayed those very people. He railed against elitism, even as he fundraised in private dining rooms where the napkins cost more than a week's groceries. He talked about family values, but his staff whispered about the calls, the temper, the trail of broken alliances he left behind. Still, he survived. Arrogance often does, for a time. In hearings, he loved the performance. He knew where the cameras were, when to raise his voice, how to push just far enough to go viral without crossing the line of formal reprimand. It wasn't policy he pursued, it was applause. His fans mistook cruelty for candor, mistook swagger for strength. When Jasmine entered the chamber that day, he saw her not as a colleague, but as a prop, another easy target to showcase his dominance. He underestimated her silence, her restraint, the quiet discipline of someone who had to earn every ounce of respect he'd been handed. To him, dignity was invisible unless it wore his reflection. So when the exchange began, the smirk, the sneer, the microphone capturing each syllable, he thought it was just another clip for his highlight reel. He didn't see the shift happening in real time, the audience turning, the tide preparing to wash him out. But across the aisle, someone had been quietly watching. Long before the lights of Washington reflected in her eyes, Jasmine Crockett learned what it meant to fight for space in rooms that weren't built for her. She grew up in a Texas neighborhood where dreams often hit ceilings before they even reached the sky. Her parents worked long hours, her father fixing cars until his hands blistered, her mother cleaning offices that would never know her name, both teaching her that dignity wasn't granted by title, it was proven by endurance. Jasmine carried that lesson into every chapter of her life. At law school, she wasn't the loudest voice, but she was the one who stayed late, double-checking every case, every statute. Her professors learned quickly that she didn't debate to win. She debated to understand, to protect, to build something fairer. When she began her legal career defending low-income families, she saw firsthand how the system treated people like paperwork, not lives. Each client, each tearful story shaped the moral gravity she carried into politics. She entered public service not through privilege, but through exhaustion. Tired of watching people with power talk about communities they'd never set foot in. Her campaign wasn't backed by lobbyists or luxury donors. It was powered by volunteers, teachers, immigrants, and mothers who believed in her quiet steel. They saw in Jasmine what they saw in themselves. Someone who'd been told no too many times and kept showing up anyway. Even in Congress, she never lost that centered calm. She didn't raise her voice to be heard. She sharpened her silence to make others listen. Every slight, every dismissal only strengthened her resolve. Her critics called her too composed, as if grace under fire were a flaw. But she knew composure was her weapon, the armor of those who've already survived worse. So when Mark Ellison tried to rattle her that day, he was stepping into a storm he didn't see coming. Because Jasmine's story wasn't written in headlines or handshakes. It was written in every unseen hour, every small act of resistance that led her to that desk. And when that moment finally came, she didn't flinch. It started with a smirk, the kind that wasn't just a gesture but a declaration of condescension. Mark leaned back in his chair, microphone angled like a weapon. "With all due respect," he said, his tone dripping with everything but respect, "maybe some of us here could use a civics lesson." The words hung heavy in the air, met with nervous laughter from his allies. He was performing, and he knew it. Cameras zoomed in, anticipating another viral moment. But Jasmine didn't move. She sat still, eyes steady, posture calm, a lighthouse in a storm she'd long learned to navigate. Her silence was not submission. It was a prelude. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, deliberate. "A civics lesson," she said. "I've lived one." The tone was so even, so controlled, that it cut deeper than any shout could have. Mark's grin faltered, just slightly. He tried to interrupt again, but this time his words stumbled over themselves. He reached for the usual rhythm, the dominance of volume, but something had shifted. The audience, aides, staffers, reporters, began leaning toward her, not him. Every attempt to dismiss her landed weaker than the last. The debate spiraled into an uncomfortable tension. His voice grew louder, hers stayed calm. He jabbed his finger in the air. She met it with clarity. "You mistake confidence for chaos," she said, "and silence for consent. But I assure you, neither applies here." The tone of the room transformed. What began as a performance turned into a reckoning. Even the hum of side conversations died down as Jasmine's words built momentum. Slow, precise, unflinching. She wasn't debating a colleague anymore. She was confronting a mindset. Mark tried one last retort, a thinly veiled jab meant to reclaim control. But the crowd didn't laugh this time. They watched, they listened, and they realized who truly held command of the moment. And then, the room went dead silent. For a heartbeat, the silence was total, thick, charged, expectant. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to fade. Mark leaned forward, ready to twist her words into something small. But Jasmine was already there, steady, unshaken, her gaze fixed not on him, but on the nation beyond the cameras. "You know," she began, voice soft but resonant, "every time someone like you tells someone like me to know my place, you forget something." She paused, just long enough for the audience to lean in. "We built this place, we cleaned it, we defended it, and now we represent it." Gasps rippled through the room. The aides who'd been typing stopped mid-keystroke. Even those who disagreed with her couldn't look away. Her tone didn't rise, but the power in her words filled the chamber like thunder muffled behind glass. Mark tried to interject, waving a dismissive hand, but she didn't yield an inch. "You want to talk civics. Civics isn't about who shouts loudest. It's about who serves longest. It's not about privilege, it's about purpose." Her words hit like precise strikes, not punches, but truths sharpened by experience. He reached for sarcasm, "Well, congratulations, Congresswoman," but the sentence collapsed under the weight of her calm. She met his gaze, steady and unmoved. "This isn't about congratulations," she said. "It's about recognition. For everyone who's been told they're too loud, too proud, too different to belong. For every little girl who's watched people like you talk over women like me, this moment isn't for you to understand, it's for them to remember." The crowd stirred. A quiet yes came from the back row. Someone exhaled loudly. Relief, vindication, awe. Even the cameras seemed to draw closer, capturing not just her face, but the energy radiating from her composure. Mark's lips tightened. He shifted in his seat, searching for footing that no longer existed. His authority, once unchallenged, now looked brittle. He glanced toward his colleagues for support, but their eyes had turned elsewhere. Jasmine had the floor, and everyone knew it. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her final words came slow, measured, almost tender. "I don't need you to respect me, I just need you to see me, and the millions who sent me here, because no matter how loud you get, our voices aren't going anywhere." The room erupted, not in applause, but in an audible wave of disbelief and admiration. Mark sat back, stunned, blinking under the bright lights that suddenly felt too harsh. Jasmine simply gathered her papers, unbothered, as if she hadn't just shifted the ground beneath the chamber. For a long moment, no one spoke, and then the murmurs began, the kind that signal something irreversible has happened. The hashtags would form within minutes, the headlines within hours. But inside that room, there was only one truth left standing. Dignity had won. But the real shock came after the cameras stopped rolling. The clip hit the internet, and within minutes it was everywhere. Phones buzzed on crowded streets, in coffee shops and late-night kitchens. Hashtag #OurPlace trended within the hour, accompanied by short loops of Jasmine's calm stare, her measured words, her undeniable presence. Memes appeared almost instantly, some humorous, some reverent, all celebrating the one person who refused to be diminished. Every retweet, every share, carried with it a pulse of pride, a collective affirmation that dignity could still rise above arrogance. News outlets scrambled to cover the moment. Analysts dissected every second, the subtle pauses, the deliberate phrasing, The way Mark's composure had crumbled while Jasmine remained anchored. Pundits who had previously dismissed her presence now found themselves forced to acknowledge the undeniable. She had shifted the conversation. Headlines shifted from debate drama to recognition of integrity. Opinion columns praised her restraint, her courage, her mastery of presence under pressure. Fans weren't passive observers, they became co-authors of the narrative. TikTok creators remixed her words with orchestral stings, Instagram feeds filled with quotes overlaying cityscapes, and Twitter threads connected the moment to decades of overlooked voices finally being heard. Across the country, communities who had felt invisible watched and felt seen, a collective nod that their stories mattered. Even politicians who had once ignored her reached out, cautiously, acknowledging the shift. Invitations for interviews, speaking engagements, and panel appearances poured in. Social validation became a tide, sweeping the moment from viral clip to cultural touchstone. Each reaction, each echo reinforced the same truth. When dignity meets injustice with calm strength, it reverberates. In the days that followed, the headlines were no longer about a single debate or single clash. They were about what that clash revealed, that courage isn't loud and strength isn't performative. Jasmine Crockett had turned a moment meant to intimidate into a lesson in grace under pressure. She reminded a nation that dignity cannot be manufactured, it must be lived. Her message reached far beyond politics. It resonated with immigrants navigating streets that sometimes felt unwelcoming, with students striving for recognition in classrooms that underestimated them, with parents teaching their children that persistence and poise are powerful tools. Every retweet, every article, every classroom discussion reinforced one central truth: respect is earned through action, not intimidation, and justice is sustained by those willing to stand even when the odds are stacked against them. Jasmine's calm defiance became a model of empowerment. She reframed what many had seen as confrontation into a broader lesson in national unity. True leadership, she showed, is about inclusion, listening, and persistence, not arrogance or performance. Those who watched saw that one person, grounded in principle, can shift narratives, challenge bias, and spark conversation that ripples across communities. The story, however, wasn't just about her. It was about the millions who saw themselves reflected in her resolve. It was about the collective pride of people who had long been told to shrink, to wait their turn, to defer to voices louder than their own. She became a mirror, showing that dignity, courage, and preparation could outshine bluster and entitlement. And as the country absorbed that lesson, it became clear that this wasn't an isolated victory. It was a blueprint for engagement, a call to stand firm in the face of arrogance, and a reminder that history often remembers those who face adversity with composure. But her words still echo today. Pam Bondi credited Jasmine Crockett's wisdom, but the truth is, the moment belonged to everyone who believes in dignity, courage, and the power of standing firm. What started as a confrontation became a symbol, a reminder that respect is earned, voices matter, and grace can silence arrogance louder than any shout. Now it's not just about watching history unfold, it's about being part of it. Share this story with someone who needs to see that integrity wins. Talk about it in classrooms, at dinner tables, in communities that have too often been overlooked. Let it ripple beyond the chamber walls. If you still believe that calm strength can challenge the status quo, that courage inspires change, that every voice deserves to be heard, then this is your moment to stand with dignity, amplify truth, and carry the message forward. The world is listening.